Number 5. Mammon. There's nothing wrong with wanting a little, right? It's nice to want. Nothing better than having a little money and power. For most of us who weren't born into a Fortune 500 lineage, it might be a little bit tricky, unless you got a little bit help. Maybe like from Mammon, the embodiment of human greed. You know, he's actually a lot more generous than his position as greed demon might suggest. You know, you don't have to do too much if you just give over your eternal soul and pledge yourself to an eternity in his service. He might reward you with great riches. That's a pretty solid transaction. Mammoth is thought to originate from an ancient word for wealth, and it's thought that this is where Mammon was first born from. He was mankind's inherent desire for wealth and greed, twisted out of subconscious want. The Gospel of Luke and Matthew both directly quote this, saying, "You cannot serve both God and Mammon," meaning you can't have a pious life and also find yourself on a quest for massive wealth, and later taken literally to mean you can't serve one of the 7 princes of hell if you worship God. Mammon is greedy. Makes sense? He's real greedy. It's said that of all the archdukes and princes of hell, Mammon is more concerned with staring at the gold pavement than any of Lucifer's rebellion or business of the heavens, taken to mean that Mammon doesn't really concern himself with anything that doesn't involve cold, hard coin. He is on that grind set 24/7. The demon of greed has taken many forms over the years, with his most consistent depiction being that of a fairly normal-looking humanoid, looming over his subjects in a giant golden throne, looking down on those who would call for his aid. He's also associated with a wolf, and is believed to be able to take the form of one for his dealings on Earth. It's said that part of the arcane ritual to evoke Mammon's spirit is to imagine your spirit as a golden wolf calling out to him. If you do invoke Mammon, just be sure you're being reasonable with what you ask for. You never know what happens if you get too greedy. Beelzebub. It's said that when the rebellion began, Lucifer fell from heaven and was cast out alongside the other fallen angels. Well, who were the lesser known fallen angels? Beelzebub is an obscure demon, but a threatening one nonetheless, and a very difficult name to pronounce. In the Testament of Solomon, the demon Beelzebub introduces himself as a threat to God's will, and anyone who serves God. Beelzebub rules over some dominions of hell, serving as one of Lucifer's trusted lieutenants. He was originally an angel, but unhappy, and when cast out with the rest of them, fell to earth, disfigured and vengeful. As he fell out of the kingdom of heaven, the other angels desperately grabbed at his wings to try and retrieve him. But instead of restraining him, the process ripped his wing from his back, leaving Beelzebub with a singular, dark, monstrous red wing. Although, I doubt he minds much, because to be honest, that sounds sick as all hell. It probably works really well for his demon aesthetic. Beelzebub presides over the pits of Tartarus, a unique dimension in hell originating from Greek mythology as a depth of the underworld. Beelzebub is a powerful sorcerer, boasting to King Solomon that he's far superior to the prophet Moses in every way. He brags of his sorcery and magic, being able to shift ideas and human perception in his favor, conjuring miracles, wonders, and form signs to humans, and is even able to bestow his gift to humans in exchange for favor. Beelzebub takes a particular personal pleasure in torturing God's servants out of his twisted malice for the heavens above. Thankfully, Beelzebub's cruelty was his undoing. When Moses parted the Red Sea, Beelzebub wanted to be there to see it in person, or in demon, I guess. When the Red Sea closed yet again, Beelzebub was trapped inside a pillar of air. But Beelzebub is confident he will return again. Number 3. Sammael. Sammael is one of the more interesting entries on this list, namely because depending on the text cited, he's either an archangel of heaven or a fallen angel serving in hell. Angels to some, demons to others, and all that. He's often referred to as the original Grim Reaper, and is thought to be where depictions of the Soul Collector stem from. Sammael across most texts is known as the Angel of Death, a title that precedes itself. I mean, you hear the Angel of Death and you know I probably should not be messing with that guy, because I'm pretty sure they also call John Wick that sometimes. It's said that on the hour of a person's final release from this mortal coil, Sammael will descend upon them, wings extended and sword drawn, dripping at its tip the poison that takes your life. Sammael's name actually translates to Venom of God, again, in case you're wondering just how nice this guy is. Sammael is known as the Accuser, the Seducer, the Destroyer, and a Midnight Joker. Sammael's role as the Seducer is an essential one to the Kingdom of Heaven. He's seen as good and evil in the same measure, but he is only serving God's will. Tempting mankind is Sammael's lot in life. It's been said as well that Sammael is the one who planted the tree of knowledge and was the serpent who tempted Adam and Eve to bite the fruit. When Abraham was tested by God to sacrifice Isaac, it was said that Sammael was the one who whispered into their ears to disobey. It's said that his ultimate goal is to bring an end to death itself, including the very concept of it. Once he's finished his ultimate mission, he'll be annihilated himself, and with death undone, his mission complete. Number 2. Mephistopheles. Imagine you could make a deal for whatever you wanted, no matter how outrageous the request. Power, influence, romance. If all it took was your soul, would you do it? Well, that's the offer Mephistopheles is prepared to make you. One of the most sinister servants in hell, Mephistopheles, or Mephisto as he's sometimes referred to, is one of Lucifer's right-hand men. Responsible for bargains and deals involving human souls, Mephistopheles takes a great sickening pleasure in luring wayward souls downwards to the underworld. If Mephistopheles has already made himself present to you, I'm afraid it's already too late to you. He doesn't go out of his way to corrupt and tempt the innocent the way other demons do, but rather he finishes the job for those who've already begun to falter on a path they can't return from. In some instances, Mephistopheles' role changes slightly. Sometimes he appears to trick people into damning themselves. In others, they're already damned and he's just finishing off the inevitable. Most famously is the legend he originates from, where the bet he places with Faust for his soul, the protagonist of the ancient German legend, who made a deal at a crossroads with Mephistopheles. In exchange for ultimate power and the servitude of Mephistopheles while Faust lives, when he passes, Faust's soul will become the property of Mephistopheles and he will enslave him and damn him for eternity. Faust got what he was promised, and the terms Faust and Faustian now became synonymous with hard bargains out of this legend. Mephistopheles knows that he's essential to the cycle of the world. He knows that as much as we hate him, we need him. He tells Faust that he's part of the dark chaos that gives birth to the light. Sure, he's offering people in exchange for eternal damnation for mortal goods, but he is inspiring people in his own twisted little way. He's trying to get you to do better so you won't hear him knocking. Number 1. Leviathan. As far as demons go, who's a bigger threat than the Leviathan? I mean, how could there even be a bigger threat? Leviathan, it's in the name. Just let that sit in your mouth for a bit and think of something big. Leviathan is thought to be the embodiment of the sin of envy, and he is one of the princes of hell and the grand admiral of hell's armies. It's tasked with pushing man towards temptation and the sin of heresy. Leviathan manifests itself as a behemoth of a creature, an incomprehensibly large sea serpent that would make H.P. Lovecraft blush. It's said to have impenetrable armored scales all over its body, and has monstrous claws as well, capable of destroying anything it would ever have to battle against, should that ever arise. It's said that it can conjure up mighty bursts of flame from its chest like a dragon. Leviathan serves as the gatekeeper of hell, with the mighty demon's very jaws serving as the gates to the underworld themselves. Said as well that Leviathan's own flesh makes up the foundations for the walls of hell, and it feasts upon souls that attempt to escape the underworld. Foolishly, of course. As far as demonic power levels go, making up the literal corners of the underworld have got to count for something. How many demons can claim to be so hardcore they practically are hell? I can see why he's such a trusted lieutenant. Number 5. Pazuzu. Our first terrifying demon up on this list has made quite the career for himself in pop culture. He's picked up some small gigs here and there. He's serving as a sort of mascot of sorts for the real fake band Gorillaz, multiple cameos on Futurama, and won some acclaim for his star-studded role in The Exorcist, possessing Reagan and making us all afraid of pea soup. Although his real historical background is far more interesting than any of his pop culture appearances. Pazuzu has been around for a long time, first being recorded as a Babylonian demon wind god, who was always playing both sides so he'd come out on top. He was a god of wind, and it was thought that the wind ravaging, storms, and locusts were all byproducts of Pazuzu's rage. But he was also thought to be a protector. He would protect the home, taking a particular liking to watching over pregnant women. He was an incredibly destructive force in nature, and when it would come time to throw down, Pazuzu would fly across the world, breaking the wings of other demons to prevent them from getting into any trouble. Sort of like a demonic Batman. His portrayal in The Exorcist is probably where most people know him from and assume those things about him, where he's seen as a much more plain Jane possessing demon, lacking his impressive wings and other traits, and not doing a whole lot of flying around or anything with the wind, focusing a lot more on projectile vomiting and harassing a couple of priests. The real Pazuzu is a lot cooler than his exorcist appearance, but no doubt more people know about that than they do an ancient Babylonian wind god. I don't think I'd like to spend much time with either incarnation face to face, and those priests definitely didn't want to either. Now ghouls, goblins, lend me your ears, and subscribe if you wouldn't mind. Number 4. Belphegor. Now another demon who's had his moment in pop culture. Maybe you recognize Belphegor from Supernatural's first fledgling season, all the way back when the boys were wide-eyed and hadn't even died once yet. Or maybe if you're a Persona fan, you recognize Belphegor as the perpetually bored demon on the can. It's a video game with a talking cat. And you play as a guy who's got a healthy sleep schedule and can manage his social circle well. It's not a game focused on realism. But it turns out, doing a little research, there was a reason for this foul demon's appearance. One of the 7 princes of hell, the demonic icon of sloth's favorite offering isn't blood or a fresh goat, but a little mud pie, feces if you want to get scientific with it. Look, I'm not going to judge, and I'm not going to ask what he's doing with it. Old lore just says that if you wanted to summon Belphegor, you had to bring him a lot of feces. There's no metric volume ever listed, just a lot. If you do summon him, he'll trade you wondrous riches, expand your ability to discover new things, expand your consciousness, but at the cost of the temptation of your mortal soul, and you'll also probably never be able to wash your hands clean again. I'm sorry, I don't usually work so blue. It's the lazy man's comedy, although perchance that's fitting for the demon prince of sloth. Belphegor has been depicted in all manner of ways over the years, appearing sometimes as esoteric things like tree branches, or sometimes taking the form of beautiful women. But one wood carving in the 18th century of him sitting on an 18th century John sealed his fate pretty much forever, and then since then, he's almost always been depicted as a horned demon sitting on a throne of sorts. Belphegor, I want to make something clear here. I'm not making fun of you. I'm trying to make sense of all this. Number 3, the Legion. Now, this next demon is a tiny bit of a cheat because although it's supposed to be a top 5 list, I'm about to make it a top 500,000 list. This next demon is known as the Legion, for it is many. The Legion's first documented recording is from the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus Christ encountered a man possessed by a demon. When he spoke to the man in an effort to exorcise him, he asked for the name of the demon inside him, and the man responded, Legion, for there were many devils inside him. Upon being exorcised from the man, the Legion asked if it could instead be transferred to a herd of pigs, which he then obliged. Now the Legion is pretty atypical when it comes to demons. It's not the prince of anything, it's not the manifestation of any one sin, and it's not any one thing at all. The Legion is made of countless demons that all function together in unison like a hive mind. When one has a thought, the rest of the Legion obeys. When one member of the Legion speaks, the rest of them speak all at once. Now sometimes the armies of Satan are referred to as the legions of hell, but I guess the Legion is a separate thing altogether. It must make filling out forms very difficult. No one's really sure what sort of demons the Legion are, or what they look like even. It's just agreed that there's a lot of them all working together on their common goals. Like I said, no one really knows what they look like, but if you've ever seen a horde of, anything all in one place, you can't imagine that it would be anything pleasant. Now the Legion isn't as much of a pop culture starlet as some of the other demons I've mentioned on this list, but that doesn't mean that it's influenced things in pop culture. The phrase Legion for we are many appears in all sorts of different things, probably because it's just a very cool way to describe yourself. A recurring boss fight in the Castlevania video games called Legion appears as a writhing mass of bodies, no doubt inspired by the story. And the character in Mass Effect named Legion is an AI life form comprised of thousands of individual AI working in tandem, who directly references the story, introducing itself, saying we are Legion for we are many. And while I'm on it, Legion was the entire best character in Mass Effect, but that's neither here nor there. Sleep easy, big guy. Number 2, Beelzebub. Now we're getting into the big hitters. Beelzebub is thought to be one of the first angels to have ever fallen to hell, alongside Leviathan and Lucifer himself. He and Lucifer actually have a bit of an identity crisis, as the two are sometimes thought to be interchangeable. They must have similar haircuts. Some demonologists argue that Beelzebub is another name for Lucifer, and some others pose that he's one of his most trusted lieutenants. But whatever Beelzebub is, everyone can agree that he's pretty horrifying. His history is fairly interesting. It's thought that his namesake is a mockery of the god Baal, an ancient Bronze Age god of fertility. Some scholars believe that Beelzebub's name comes from Baal-zebub, translating to Lord of the Flies, inferring that the followers of Baal are nothing more than flies worshipping a dung god. They didn't get the memo that Belphegor was the dung god. The Lord of the Flies sort of ended up becoming Beelzebub's title, with almost all depictions of the demon featuring flies in ubiquitous amounts around him. Occasionally he's even depicted as a giant fly. It's very Kafkaesque. Beelzebub is said to be one of the most powerful demons inside of Hell's domain, capable of great control over humanity, able to tempt them. Beelzebub was cited during the Salem witch trials as the entity that had corrupted and swayed so many women to witchery. Now there's some discrepancy as to what sin Beelzebub is thought to preside over, with some offerings saying that he represents pride, some others saying that he represents gluttony, which I would say probably seems a little more fitting for a fly demon anyway, and he's most commonly associated with gluttony. Number 1, Asmodeus. Yeah, it probably would have made a lot of sense to have Lucifer as the number 1 spot on this list. I mean, he's the king of hell and all that. So let's just take this moment, give him an honorable mention, and say he's at the number 0 spot, just because I thought it was a little obvious, and I'm pretty sure you know who Satan is, and there's other demons we could talk about, bring up some unknown ones. So filling in at the number 1 spot is Asmodeus, one of the princes of hell, and the embodiment of the cardinal sin of lust. Asmodeus fell from heaven alongside the other fallen angels, reforming as a prince of hell. Asmodeus is said to have been married to Lilith, the primordial she-demon, famed for her banishing from the Garden of Eden and famed for destroying Fraser Crane. Lilith was cursed and banished for her defilement and depicted as a temptress, and Asmodeus saw all that and was like, hey girl, I'm into all that stuff. You want to procreate an endless stream of demons into the world and reign over a dominion of chaos? And the rest is wedded bliss. Depictions of Asmodeus vary pretty wildly from case to case. Occasionally he's drawn as a handsome young fella, but most commonly he's depicted as a squat, vaguely humanoid creature with a rooster leg, the tail of a snake, 3 heads, comprising of a bull, a goat, and a scruffy demon head as the center. Asmodeus presides over lust with the help of his beloved Lilith, and the two tempt humans with madness and desire to ruin people with lechery. Somehow this wasn't enough for Asmodeus though, as some stories also describe Asmodeus as having command over the betting halls of hell, and is responsible for tempting man's souls towards gambling. So what I am hearing from this is that Asmodeus probably parties harder than any demon out there.
Number 5, the Lernean Hydra. I'm no Hercules per se. Yeah, nothing. But thankfully, actually, because those are pretty big shoes to fill. Because that dude had to be brave beyond just like deep breaths and good pep talks. Guy had to literally fight like a 10-story condo building. How does one dude equipped with a club and a sword kill a 10-story building with teeth and 3 heads? Well, 5 heads. Well, 10 heads. Depending on how many you cut off, I guess. I guess that's why his name will be remembered and mine will be lost at sea. I guess he was a demigod, half powerful, half regular, a little unfair. By the way, which Hercules did you grow up on? I grew up on the Disney version, and Kevin Sorbo. Ugh, what a hunk. But there's been a lot, including the ancient real guy. She's known as simply the Hydra. As a serpentine water monster in Greek and Roman mythology, it's terrifying. Its lair was at the Lake of Lerna, also known to be the entrance of the underworld. Yikes. In the myth, the monster is killed by Hercules, as the second of his 12 labors. Okay, so this guy did it and then went on to go and do like 10 more. 10-0. Like, how hard can it be, right? I mean, it does have multiple heads. Yeah, it does have that. Also, apparently has poisonous breath and blood so violent that its scent is even deadly. Later versions of the Hydra story added regeneration to the monster's abilities too, so it can just start growing heads back at will. For every head chopped off, the Hydra would regrow 2 heads. So every time the Meg bites a head, there's 2 more. Another 2 are growing. Yeah, good thing this thing was hungry and swallows whales whole, because that's gonna be a lot of protein. Number 4, Jormungandr. Keeping it in the mythology department, we head up a little north. Jormungandr, aka Huge Monster, also known as the Midgard Serpent or the World Serpent. It is a sea serpent and the middle child of Loki and giantess Angrboda. And those middle children, huh? Always the problem kids. I would know. I am one. According to the prose Edda, Odin took Loki's 3 children by Angrboda, Fenrir, Hel, and Jormungandr, and tossed Jormungandr into the great ocean. The serpent grew so large that it was able to surround the entire earth and grasp it in its own tail, as it's referred to as, well, the World Serpent. And apparently, when it releases its tail, Ragnarok will begin. Yeah, basically a destruction to the end of the world. Yeah, all this rich history is so heavy and gloomy, isn't it? Isn't there like a, the sun will shine like California for all to enjoy? Like, where's that written down? Nowhere, huh? Just cataclysms and monsters. Jormungandr's arch enemy is the thunder god Thor. And apparently a megalodon too. Cause let's face it, a giant serpent versus a 4-story great white, it would definitely be a good fight. I think if Thor showed up and started smashing up both, it would literally be the best Marvel Universe movie yet. Another encounter comes when Thor goes fishing with the giant Hymir. When Hymir refuses to provide Thor with bait, he strikes the head off Hymir's largest ox to use as his bait. Okay, easy, Roid Rage. Sheesh. They row to a point where Hymir fishes, he prepares his fishing line and a large hook and baits it with the ox head, which Jormungandr bites. Thor then yanks the serpent up from the water and the two throw hands. Okay, so it sounds like it isn't that big. I mean, it's huge, but the wrapping around the planet has got my dimensions off. Maybe it was like a metric versus imperial thing back then. I don't know, what do you think? Comment down below who would win, because when it gets into mystical powers and stuff, it becomes a little unfairly matched, no? Number 3, Cthulhu. Come on, we know this guy. Now this would be a good fight. This is sort of fathomable. Well, kinda. An extinct shark versus a made-up ender of worlds. Cool, let's do that. Basically a giant humanoid octopus dragon versus the Carcharaslus megalodon. A triplex-size apex predator. It's definitely gonna be in Vegas, and pay-per-view, I'll tell you that for free. Cthulhu is a fictional cosmic horror entity thought up by the twisted mind of cosmic horror writer H.P. Lovecraft. First introduced in his short story called The Call of Cthulhu, published by the American pulp magazine Weird Tales in 1928. He's like the first creature Lovecraft pondered up. He's terrifying. He's supposed to bring Armageddon upon us when he wakes up from the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, again, not all sunshine and rainbows with these stories. Actually, like, ever with these stories. Cthulhu is a great old one, almost the god of all gods in these stories. All these characters intertwine, and apparently he's our last call. Lovecraft depicts it as a gigantic entity worshipped by cultists in the shape of a green octopus dragon humanoid bipedal creature. And it's like 10 stories high. Yeah, like massive. Like us looking at toy army men. The Lovecraft universe, aka the Cthulhu mythos, its appearance alone is enough to haunt your dreams. Lovecraft describes this guy as a face full of octopus-like feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, sharp claws on its hands and feet, and of course, dragon's wings. So it can fly and swim. In other words, the worst thing you can imagine. Yeah. Cthulhu can fly, which he has on the Meg, for sure. And also, the mind control, I don't know how sharks' brains works, but Cthulhu gets in there, yeah, you're in trouble, Sharky. Number 2, the Leviathan. Okay, so we're diving into some very sacred texts now, the Bible. In said pieces of scripture, there's a tale of a giant creature that could swallow up cities, apparently, and is also an awesome roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland. Gotta try it if you haven't been on it yet. This twisty, turny, vicious monster was actually modeled after this twisty, turny, vicious monster, the Leviathan, the second of the great monsters described in the book of Job. This Leviathan is an absolute unit of a sea monster who's impervious to literally any human weapon. I mean, what were the weapons back then though? Like bows and arrows, swords maybe, little pokey things, you know? It's not gonna do much. Apparently locusts too, yeah, those are terrifying. This Leviathan breathes fire. It emits smoke from its nostrils, and it's related to another ancient monster called Loten, a 7-headed giant serpent who's represented as pure chaos. I mean, what Bible creature isn't terrifying though? Was this giant sea snake a water dragon? Because apparently it's something like 300 miles long according to the Bible. So it's like Jormungandr territory, but longer. Maybe it's the same creature, told by two different peoples? Mind blown. Again, the Megalodon I think would just chomp this thing and dive deep down to the Twilight Zone and it's lights out. We've seen Jaws, right? Yeah, picture that but like 40 times the size. Yeah, we're gonna need a bigger boat. Number 1, Godzilla. I had to, obviously, we're having fun here today. Godzilla, yes, of course, the king of kings, aka kaiju, originates from a series of Japanese films. The character first appeared in the 1954 film Godzilla and became a worldwide pop culture icon ever since. Appearing in a ton of different media, 32 films, 4 American films, video games, novels, comic books, TV shows, you name it. Godzilla has been, like I said, the king of all monsters. Of course, a phrase first used in Godzilla, King of Monsters. Godzilla's enormous. It's destructive. It's a prehistoric sea monster awakened and empowered by nuclear radiation. With the nuclear incidents of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Lucky Dragon 5 incident, Godzilla doesn't really like nukes. Yeah. The amphibious reptilian monster is basically based around a concept of a dinosaur, erect, standing up, very tall. Of course, a bony plated back and tail, and let's not forget the special abilities Godzilla has as well. Atomic heat beams, or as I like to call it, stank breath. Dude had tonsil stones so bad, nuclear energy generates from them. Well, not really, but inside of his body using electromagnetic force to concentrate it into a laser radioactive beam. Amphibious, of course, so it swims and breathes underwater, which is gonna come in handy. Immune to conventional weapons and can regenerate. Yeah. And it's massive. Of course, Godzilla was said to average around 150 feet tall. In the American version, Godzilla is like 400 feet tall. Like, just a little bit bigger. This is kind of a no-brainer here, obviously, right? This little sunfish would have nothing on the king.
Number 5, oarfish. Coming in at the number 5 spot is this terrifying 16-foot long monstrosity hauled out of the ocean by Chilean fishermen. Shocking those who learned, like me, that fish can be 5 meters long sometimes. The clip was posted to TikTok, where it went viral almost immediately, sweeping up 10 million views pretty quickly. Most people worried this fish might be a bringer of bad times, and there might be an inkling of truth to that. This fish, called an oarfish, is thought in some cultures to be an omen of impending bad fortune. I mean, I understand it completely. If I picked this thing out of the water, I would not think that I had been blessed by good fortune. In Japanese folklore, this fish is sometimes referred to as Ryogo no Tsukai, translating to the messenger from the sea god's palace, and I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation. I'm so very sorry. It's linked to the legend of Namazu, a giant sea snake which caused earthquakes whenever it would rise. Oarfish live deep in the depths of the sea. And some scientists theorize that they only ever rise nearer to surface level whenever there's a disturbance in the tectonic plates, which would definitely make this fish a bad omen and a bringer of earthquakes. Now, the actual oarfish, once you get aside all the legend, terrifying as it might look, is a bit of a gentle giant. It's the largest bony fish in the world, and it isn't much of a predator, preferring to swim around just hoovering up plankton. They barely even have teeth, to be honest, and they don't really pose a threat to humans. Unless you consider scaring the heck out of you a threat. You want to watch more scary sea creature videos? Well, I got great news for you because we have loads upon loads on the channel. Number 4, green-eyed shark. Now, if the ocean is where all the scariest stuff in the world is hiding, that goes triple for any body of water around Australia, which is home to some of the actual most terrifying entities ever to walk the planet, and swim the planet, and fly the planet. It's where they send the animals that are too hardcore for the rest of the world. An Australian angler, Trapman Bermagee, pulled out this disgusting wretch of a fish, some 2,000 feet beneath the sea. He captioned it, "The face of a deep-sea rough-skinned shark." Now, a little bit of a fake Australian accent there, I can't help it. Unsurprisingly, most commenters wanted to point out how disgusting the thing was, which is very similar to what I'm doing now. And usually I'm a sucker for green eyes, but not on this leathery little monster. This thing looks like a baseball glove that came to life. I'm not having it. There's actually a lot of debate as to what this little thing is. Some commenters had suggested that it was a cookie cutter shark, which might sound adorable when you hear that. That sounds pretty cute, but I promise you it is not cute at all. A cookie cutter shark is named that because of its jagged mouth, which leaves cookie cutter-like imprints on its victims, just like big holes in anything that it's biting at. However, the fisherman pointed out this wasn't a cookie cutter shark. A cookie cutter shark looks absolutely vile, but in a very different way. A cookie cutter shark looks more like a mole rat that was left in the sun for a few weeks, whereas this thing looks like it was grilled before ever being born. Now, another commenter suggested that this shark could be something called an endeavor spur dog shark, which is a mouthful and a half. Now, whatever the creature is, it goes without saying, I want very little to do with this shark. Number 3, long-nosed chimera. You wouldn't really expect anything horrifying to exist in Newfoundland. It's a very pleasant place. You think it's mostly just chips and Jig's dinner all the way down. Well, for Gary Goodyear, a fisherman out of Templeman, Newfoundland, he pulled this long-nosed chimera out of the water and gave himself quite the shock. His nets went some 2,000 feet down into the water, where he unearthed this long-beaked mystery fish. When he pulled it up, the crew could not believe what they had seen. It was not at all what they were expecting. I have to include this quote from one of the articles because it's too newfie not to include. Goodyear said, "We're hauling away and by I seen this coming around the roller. I said, good God, what in the heck is that?" Now, when he first pulled it up, he wondered at first if it might have been a platypus because of the impressive snoot on the beast. He described this pelagic nightmare's beak as being very rubbery, like cartilage. No one on the boat had any idea what they had found, so they kept the body of the fish and took it to a local fishery in the hopes that someone could properly ID their mystery monster. Luckily, somebody actually knew and it got correctly identified as a long-nosed chimera, an ancient deep-sea dwelling fish famous for its green eyes and, putting this gently, its monstrous appearance. The reason that its nose felt like cartilage is because the fish is completely cartilage from nose to tail. It's actually boneless. So this fish is a spineless coward. The creature most likely perished as it was being pulled up. An extreme pressure change from being 2,000 feet beneath the sea gave it a serious case of the bends. Maybe was a blessing in disguise, because I'm not sure I'd want to see this thing alive. I'm not sure I'd want to see it thrashing around on the floor of a commercial fishing boat. I think that wouldn't be good for anybody. Number 2, decorator crab. Our next spot comes to us all the way from Thailand. Some local fishermen in Koh Yao Noi pulled up their nets while fishing for crabs and discovered they'd brought up an alien-looking creature with them that mystified them. They couldn't identify this thing. Take a look at this creepy little crawly. Kinda looks like a spider that's got a good fashion sense, got really into accessorizing. But it almost kinda looks like it shouldn't be moving at all. Like it's just some garbage that got cursed into being alive, or maybe some seaweed that developed sentience. The fishermen were understandably pretty puzzled by this thing, so they decided to post a video of the then unidentified critter, hoping to get some answers, and for once, the internet was actually helpful. The creature was correctly identified as a decorator crab, which is not something I'd heard of before this video, but I am so glad I learned about it, and I am even happier that I can pass it on to you. A decorator crab gets its name for its habit of using whatever it can scavenge around its environment to make into camouflage from predators. Now the really cool thing is that they'll use literally anything they can find. Debris, garbage, they'll even use little bits of other animals in a gruesome manner like fins or parts of a crab shell. If it can be attached to it in some way, a decorator crab will stick it to itself. They're covered in tiny Velcro-like hairs that allow them to attach their findings easily. I would love having that. It would save me so much time getting dressed. They've been recorded chewing on things like kelp or seaweed to break them down into more easily attachable accessories. Now most of the creatures on this list have been weird and scary and kind of look horrifying, and I'm not gonna lie, the decorator crab kind of looks pretty scary too, but I absolutely adore the decorator crab. It is showing up every other creature in the ocean when it comes to outfits. I love the garbage costume. It's given camp in a very good way. This thing is like a crab Lady Gaga, and I love it. Number 1, ghost shark. Roman Fedortsov routinely entertains his 600,000 Instagram followers with pictures of all the strange creatures he fishes up while sailing around Murmansk, a port city in Russia. His Instagram is a treasure trove of scary undersea finds, and I absolutely recommend that you toss him a follow if you're into this sort of thing, as he's kind of the head honcho for it. This video could easily just have been 5 things that he fished out himself. Nobody is pulling out weird things the way Roman is. But with so many to choose from, I had a tough time, but I landed on this here fish, sometimes called Frankenstein's fish, due to the stitches all over its body looking like it's been sewn together from the bodies of several other fishes. It's also been referred to as a ratfish, a ghost shark, a spookfish, but officially they're known as ghost chimeras. I like that it's got nothing but scary nicknames. These things are bad news from teeth to tail. They have a spiny dorsal fin that's poisonous to the touch. It's got a mouth of rat-like teeth that helps it grind down anything it catches, crushing its prey in its jaws. Usually goes after things like crabs or prawns, so the rat teeth help pulverize the shells. These little things also have an inherent ability to detect the electric fields produced by other creatures, and I wish I knew even the littlest bit about biology, because this fish sounds like it's magic. Fish also sounds overpowered, not gonna lie. Now I think it's a little treat. We ought to have a little slideshow at the end of just a bunch of Fedortsov's weirdest catches, and I'll just react to them. Ready? Okay, here we go, lightning round. Who would make this? Why would a creature evolve like this? I guarantee you this thing looks cuter as sashimi. That is a face not even Mother Nature could love, if that even is a face. You know what, this one I'm actually kind of coming around to. I wouldn't touch it, I wouldn't order it, but I kind of like it.